and welcome to this edition of Billionaires in Boxers. I'm joined by Justin as usual. Hey, Justin.
How's it, guys?
All good, my
Back
friend.
in the Pink Princess Palace.
In the Princess Palace. Today we are joined by a very special guest, James Mulvany. James, how you doing, mate?
Hey,
Good, yeah, really
good,
good.
yeah,
How's it
really
going?
good. How's it going?
Good, thanks, buddy. I'm glad to have you on the show because obviously you talk about a lot. I mean, we'll dive into all this, but you touch on a lot of things that are very close to my heart, kind of podcasting and global networking and information sharing and all that juicy stuff. So why don't, for the folks at home that don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us what you're all about.
Absolutely. So, my name's James Mulvany. I'm founder of podcast.co, also radio.co and matchmaker.fm, which are all startups doing really interesting things in the audio and broadcasting spaces. So, Matchmaker is our newest platform, which is we're going to be talking a bit about later, I think. It basically connects podcasters with guests, which is a huge opportunity at the moment, particularly, if you're a business, you're looking to expose more people to your products or services. Getting booked on podcasts is a fantastic thing to do. And over at podcast.co, we also work with lots of businesses from small to large in creating podcasts, getting their messages out there. And we also have a platform to make it really super simple to get your podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc.
Well, look, James is very modest, so I will say this for him: his platforms are fantastic. I've heard about them for a long time. He has some really great people utilizing them, saying some great things. I myself actually signed up for Matchmaker.fm a few days ago. James and I were talking about this off air. And I've had some incredible results from it, genuinely. I mean, I'm probably talking 5 or 6 guests for our show who you'll be seeing over the coming weeks. In
Yep.
fact, I'll tell you which guest came from there so that you can get some tangible evidence for it when people come on the
Yeah,
show.
please do.
And I've also got about 6 to 10 invites to appear on other people's podcasts, which is fantastic. I love to do that. I love sharing to new audiences. So, James, you're doing some awesome stuff, mate. I love it. I mean, some people are only just waking
Thanks.
up to podcasting, and you're connecting the podcasting world.
I think it's grown a lot. It's interestingly this weekend. I don't know when this will go out, but Apple have just announced there is 1 million podcasts, active podcasts on their directory. So that's kind of exciting because last year it was around 600,000. It grew by I think 50,000 in February. So since then, every month we seem to be adding an additional sort of 50 to 100,000 podcasts, and that's right now. That number is only going to continue increasing. So I think we'll kind of dive into this today. But the main message I want to point out is a lot of people are saying, oh, is it too late to start a podcast? Well, right now, 1 million sounds like a big number, but actually, when you compare it to the number of Instagram profiles or the number of Facebook pages or the number of YouTube channels, it's tiny.
Very tiny. And I
Yeah,
see
so there's a
opportunity
big
there.
opportunity
Yeah,
there.
no, completely agree. Well, look,
I
let's.
mean, I'm assuming, James, that you're expecting to have a fair following. What's the? Or am I getting too technical now? What's a fair following in this kind of world for you to justify a podcast, or is it a labor of love, or is it something of business worth? What are the reasons for people who are doing this?
I mean, I think it depends. If we're going to focus specifically on business, I think there are 3 main reasons a business can use podcast. And these are as follows. Number one, for sales and outreach and getting people, into your business, making people aware of your business. The second is engaging with your existing customers, and encouraging kind of black brand loyalty. And the third would be engaging with stakeholders or employees, particularly for large corporations who have got offices all over the world, or they have thousands of employees and based across different offices. It's a really good way of engaging with people, and more effective than perhaps email newsletters, which are kind of easily ignored. So there are the sort of 3 main sort of pillars or the main sort of strategies that businesses can use podcasting for. On the flip side, if you're personally looking to get involved in podcasting, sometimes it is a labour of love. Some people get lucky and do really, really well and end up turning that into a business, and it's entirely possible route that you can go down to start off with just doing something out of passion and end up becoming a business. There are plenty of podcasts out there that are making 5 and 6 figure sums every month, either from their subscribers, patron supporters, or from sponsorship deals, selling merchandise and that kind of thing.
Justin, actually, to touch on that, I actually did exactly that. So I've sold 2 podcasts previously. They were both in the sporting world rather than in the business world, but they were started out off as they were at the raw, immediate after-match reactions, whether we were at the stadium or whether we were at home and we were just watching it on TV. and we would always aim to release a 45-minute podcast an hour after the game had finished because people still wanted to binge on content at that point.
Yeah, makes
And
sense.
that ended up growing really well. Lots of people ended up approaching us as brands saying, you have a good audience, we'd like to sponsor you because we're trying to reach into that audience a bit more. So in terms of numbers, I mean, Justin, you asked the question about numbers. There's a business coach I really like. I've mentioned him before, a guy called Daniel Priestley. And he says it's not important to be famous to the world. It's important to be famous to 500 to 1,000 of your fans, your ideal customers. Yeah. You know, how much business can you realistically deal with? Do you need the whole world to know who you are? Or do you just need 500 of your key market and your ideal customers to know who you are?
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that, Phil. I think, having a smaller audience that's really engaged with what you're talking about and more focused on whatever topic you're talking about is more valuable than saying, oh, I've got 100,000 followers of who could just be anybody and everyone, but they're not necessarily going to be taking action on what you're saying. So I think especially if you're perhaps looking at podcasting as an individual, but maybe you're a freelancer, maybe you've got a small business. It also helps massively with personal branding as well, helping your customers get to know you.
Massively. So that was the main reason I used it. I mean, I often said that I had loads of interesting conversations with people all day, every day, that actually lots of other people in my market would be interested in. So I'd say about 50% of my calls was telling other people or conversations I'd had with other people that I thought they'd be interested in. So it became about time saving at first. It was like, well, I should really record these as a podcast. And then people were enjoying coming on the show and saying, "Oh, it's great. I mean, I got to know you better. I got to know more about you." Even people that I work with, sort of at the time, were like, "I got to see a different side of your personality, and I like that." And it kind of grew from there. So as a personal branding tool, I highly recommend it. Mostly because I'm too lazy to write a blog. Um, I don't like written content. I get bored. I'm the guy that has like 5 lines on a Word document and it lives there for the next 6 weeks and doesn't get touched again. Whereas a podcast, I'll jump on and do that stuff all day, every day. We got 3 arranged today, so
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to remember as well with audio is it's the oldest form of communication. It existed a long time before writing did. So I think that's why podcasts have been really popular, and I think that's why they continue to sort of grow, is because it's something that people really resonate with, and it's kind of like a natural way to communicate with people. Yeah, okay, you can write blog posts, but again, I think different people prefer different modes of communication. A benefit to podcasts versus videos, you can digest them very passively, so you don't have to be sat watching the video. You can listen to it in the background. A podcast is perfect for that. You can listen to it while you're doing other activities. So podcasts people listen to in the car while they're driving to work, or on public transport, or while they're having a run, or in the gym, or doing the cooking, or whatever it might be.
I'll give you all a bit of a confession. I grew up in a house full of book nerds, I suppose, bookworms. They all loved the good read, and I didn't. I never read anything. I mean, I remember being bought all the Harry Potter books as a child, trying to inspire me to read, and I was not interested in reading. If it didn't have a ball or it wasn't fast paced, I wasn't interested. Um, but what has been really interesting is now as an adult, I probably read 2 books a week via audiobook. So I love audiobooks. I love listening to business audiobooks. I'll listen to them in bed while we're driving, while I do it in the supermarket, headphones on, walking around listening to some business book. And I absolutely love that. It's on my phone, so I can pause it. I can go to notes and write some notes, and I'm much more likely to look at them than I am some piece of paper in my house somewhere. And actually, the fact that people have now started to take more and more on, so I use Audible, which is part of Amazon. Um, there's loads out there, but I highly recommend it. Yeah, plug. Yeah, Amazon, you want to give me some free stuff, Jeff? I'll send you my address, no problem. Or just some money.
James, so are you saying that I mean, I'm a layman's guy, so podcasts has moved away from where it's just a person's opinion piece, where an opinion is heard regarding something, and where it's now become something more. I mean, what is the more there?
Well, I think podcasts. I think gone are the days, right, when podcasts are 2 blokes down the pub having a laugh and it's kind of very lo-fi. That's fine. There's still some podcasts like that. And, if you look at Joe Rogan, which is probably the biggest podcast out there, everyone knows that. That's very conversational. The quality of the audio and everything is still very good. That's one thing we always recommend if you're a business and you're looking at doing podcasting as a tool for marketing or customer relations, try and at least get a good quality audio. If you record a podcast built-in laptop microphone, or if you record a podcast on your iPhone speaker, or iPhone microphone rather, it's never going to sound as good. But if you spend a small amount of money investing in a decent quality USB microphone, you can pick them up for $50, something like that. And it will give you 10 times better quality, and it makes the content a lot more listenable, and your listeners are not going to fatigue as much. So I think the opinion thing still is fine, and there are still plenty of podcasts which are just people messing around, having a laugh with their mates. But I think as a business, you've got to be a bit clever, because you've got to figure out a way that you're going to stand out from the crowd. And ultimately, I think providing education, providing insights, and interviewing people is a great way of doing that. A quick way of doing that as well, because you can go and find 5 experts on different topics who are really engaging. Plus, also, it's a great networking tool, because you're speaking to people who are top of their game.
I mean, I'm a big believer in following my gut. I've always followed my gut and my heart in business much more than I follow my head. I'd probably be much richer if I'd followed my head. But the reason I say that is when you get to meet people, you have a reaction with them, don't you? I mean, people call it gut reaction. You either like someone or you don't. You only get a first chance to make a first impression. And some people you resonate with and some people you don't. And that's absolutely fine, because it takes all sorts to make a world. But you're absolutely right. Podcasting in this form of networking is great. I get a podcast with people and think, that guy's awesome. He's amazing at what he does. I've really enjoyed that. My listeners are going to enjoy that. But they're kind of annoying, so I probably won't see them that much. And then I speak to other people and I think, actually, whatever it is I can do to get involved in that project with that person, I'm going to do it, because I can see they're going places. I can see what I bring to the table, and that excites me. And
Philip, are you trying to tell me that? Sorry, Phil. You trying to tell me that I irritate you by any chance? I'm just checking.
No, not you. You don't irritate me. You're still here. So no, you're absolutely safe. Look, so after the break, we're going to have a good zoom in. We're going to have a look at how this can apply to businesses. So we've talked about, what's out there and the fact that podcasting is growing. So if you're sat there now thinking, okay, this is great, but how do we get started? Stick around and find out after the break.
Africans Unlocked to Season 1.
Welcome back to Billionaires in Boxers. So let's get straight down to it. We're going to have a good zoom in session now, and we're going to have a look at how we actually do this. So what is the opportunity out there for businesses? What businesses are doing it well that we can kind of take some inspiration from and go and take a look and learn from other people's lessons, I suppose. That's a great way to start. I'm a big believer in not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
James, I mean, listen, with your platform, I mean, I've had a good look on there already, and I've been impressed by plenty of the names. So I mean, I suspect you've got more than a few good news stories in terms of people who are enjoying some success from their podcast.
Yeah, there's a couple of case studies I wanted to talk about today. The first is one of our clients, and the first is one of the biggest companies in the world. So, firstly, I want to talk about Samsung, and particularly a division of Samsung called Samsung Next, which is really focused in on the startup world, how technology is helping people progress. And we've been working with Samsung now for around about a year. One of the things that they did with us last fall, around November time, I think it was. There's a big technology conference in Helsinki called Slush, and it's absolutely massive. Samsung wanted to see how they could build in a brand activation into their stand, on the conference exhibition hall floor. So we suggested actually building a podcast studio right into the stand. It's number one, right? There's so many interesting people, so they can easily get conference speakers as they're coming off stage. Come into the studio. Let's record a little half an hour session with you. So there's a huge availability of really interesting people to interview. Secondly, we had a row of headphones just outside the glass, so people could actually listen to the podcast as they were being recorded in real time. So immediately it's pulling people onto the stand, and it's gonna helps. Yeah, and it's just such a fantastic experience to be a part of. We also helped them record at another conference as well in Berlin called TOA. So this is a way of using podcasting, not only for the end result, you're not just using it as a tool to say, okay, you can listen to this, here's who we spoke to at TOA, or here's who we spoke to at Slush Festival, but, actually getting people involved and getting people engaged whilst they're actually on the stand. And, immediately that's something that no one else around you has. Everyone in the exhibition has got the standard thing where they're handing out flyers or giving out pens. Well, why not actually get people involved and have a podcast studio right on your stand? I think it was a really exciting, thing to do. Obviously Samsung, they've got huge reach, so it's very easy for them to get traction. But I think the main thing they were focusing on is speaking to really interesting guests. People who are kind of futurists and people who've got expertise in the technology sectors to try and provide as much value as they can to their audience.
That they should also, if they haven't already, I suspect they will have done, but they should also get involved with the media passes directly for the events, as well as kind of getting the draw. Because I remember when I've spoken at those kind of events, there's always a media list that you get given of places that you have to be at certain times to do certain interviews with television and different places. So if you get that podcast put onto that route, then all of the keynote speakers will also be coming over and spending a period of time as well.
Yeah, I suspect that's exactly what they did, to be honest. As I say, we were there to kind of facilitate the process, and we helped them, with the consultation in terms of how they actually would do it logistically. And then obviously we edited all the podcasts up, so we kind of provided an end-to-end solution for them. But in terms of the actual guests, that kind of came from their team. So yeah, but
our viewers, you'd be surprised actually, how many places you can actually pick up a press pass with a podcast and things like that, because everybody's looking for exposure, everybody's looking for credibility. In fact, whilst James is talking about exhibitions and things, exhibitions are a great example because they have to sell tickets to the exhibition, so they're desperate for you to be keen on the people who are there and on their events. So if you contact those people directly, you're likely to get a list of speakers, a list of exhibitors. You'll be given access to somebody there who's trying to help sell the event as well. And before you know it, you've got 10, 12 episodes of fantastic content that's very relevant about an exhibition that's coming up soon that you can now attend.
yeah, and I would also add to that, if you're working in a very specific industry and you're going to really relevant trade shows that are unique to that industry, no one else is going to be doing this because it's still kind of quite a new thing. So you'd be really at the cutting edge. If you could say to the trade show, look, I've got a podcast all about X, whatever is relevant to that trade show, they'll be more than happy to let you in and hook you up with speaking to some really interesting people. And ultimately as well, it gives you great exposure on the trade floor too.
Market. And they were just kind of one of many, I suppose. I mean, how many people do that job? And they were trying to win work, and they'd been at exec level, but that kind of reputation was only taking them so far. And then they realized that actually the obstacle wasn't around their services. The obstacle was around businesses in that sector not seeing the importance of content. So what they did was they set up a TV studio out of their sort of large area at the back of their house. And started inviting guest speakers on from different parts of the industry, and became known as the go-to person for content because they get it. I mean, everybody's aspiring to be at their level. Like, if you talk to anybody in that space about content, that name will come up in the first 10 seconds. Oh, I want to be more like such and such a person, creating stuff like such and such a person. Now I even hear things like, "Oh, I was on their show, it was fantastic," and that's almost like a sign of credibility. So it's not difficult to do that if you know what you're talking about, and it is a fantastic tool to be able to, I don't know, to open up the door and open up the world, I guess.
Yeah. The second case study I wanted to sort of talk about, and as I say, this is not one of our clients, but it's definitely one of the biggest brands in the world, which is McDonald's. And this is an example from last year. And they did a really clever, I felt, sort of viral marketing campaign, guerrilla marketing. It's one of these things that was just, they got it right. And I think it was a great example of branding and how you can just use podcasts to kind of explode a brand and get people all aware of this. So obviously there's been a lot of podcasts around sort of the area of sort of investigative research, true crime, these kind of genres. So, Serial being the sort of the foremost one that everyone talks about. So what McDonald's did is they put together, and it was only a 3-part series. So they didn't spend, a lot of time in terms of what the consumer had to listen to doing this. However, what they did do was they went after a really good production company who put something together which just sounded incredible. And it was themed like Serial. So the music and everything and the way it was done, it was almost like it was a really serious investigation. And it was called The Source. And it was the actual topic of it was kind of relatively silly. So they had this Szechuan sauce. Am I saying that right? Like a spicy sauce, which they had with McNuggets. And they basically did this kind of documentary about why that there was such demand for this sauce and they didn't make enough of it and something like this. And to be honest with you, I haven't actually listened to it myself, but I thought as a kind of a marketing exercise, I think this was just brilliant. Everyone was talking about it. And as I say, it was kind of just like a mockumentary almost, but it exploded, took off, really did very well. And, of course, McDonald's is McDonald's, so of course everyone was talking about it. But, I think leveraging this kind of creativity could still be implemented into any small business. It doesn't have to necessarily be a big global brand like McDonald's.
Justin, obviously, over in Africa, there's far more people now starting to sign up for podcasts. I think that's probably a lot to do with the connectivity now being able to kind of facilitate that. I mean, James, we mentioned the other day, didn't we, that you've had a number of signups from Africa over the last sort of 6 to 12 months as well, sort of a big spike in increase from the area. So, Justin, how do you think that African businesses in particular can kind of go about embracing the podcast culture? Because I have to be honest, I love a lot of the African vibe, and I think if you could translate that to podcasts, I mean, they would be world beaters.
Yeah. Look, it's you remember in Africa we're very tactile, we're very pragmatic. So you need to bring that across in the way that you speak and the way that you engage with people. Podcast, even in my mind, I mean, I know I've had casts and I've listened to podcasts and stuff like that, but it's not a part of our. It's not as much a part of our world as much as it is maybe globally. But however, it will be. And that's the thing. There's different. In coaching, in business coaching, we always speak about communication styles. There's different types of communication styles. And James, you tell me if I'm wrong here, but in my view, there's segments of the world that are interested in specific media. So for instance, I didn't even sign up to Twitter until Philip made me. Sorry, Phil. I keep on saying because I'm reading your name over there. You must just change your name to Phil. Okay. So I didn't even sign up to Twitter until Phil told me to. And I know about it. Everyone uses it around me, but I just don't care for it. Sorry, Twitter, bad plug. Yeah, anti-plug. So each different segment has a different way to engage. So I'm assuming the podcast world is exactly that. It's another engagement tool, and you have a very specific demographic that's interested in and that engaged by that. So can you tell a bit more about that demographic and how
True, James.
people,
Well, it's an interesting question. Is that true? Is there a demographic of people that listen to podcasts, or what are the sort of? I'm putting you on the spot here, buddy.
Yeah.
What do the
And
stats look like in
that's
terms of
that's the way I see it. Is it? Yeah.
Okay, well, some quick stats. I'd say 50-50 male and female split. So it's not the demographic is kind of evenly split between male and female. That's stat number one, which I just have off the top of my head. Stat number two is the majority of the audience is still quite young, between 20 and 35. That's the sort of biggest market share. The next thing to say is that a lot of podcast listeners have high disposable incomes. And bear in mind, most of these statistics are pulled from surveys which have been done in the USA, just to kind of put it out there. So obviously it will vary slightly different depending on country to country. But I would say that when the market, certainly here in the UK and also in the USA, the difference between, say, 5 years ago is most people now have an understanding of what a podcast actually is, right? If you went up to someone in the street 5 years ago and said, what's a podcast? You might get maybe like 4 out of 10 people who say, well, I know what a podcast is, I listen to podcasts. Now it's more going to be like 7 or 8 out of 10 people who say, yeah, I listen to podcasts. So I think, or at least have an understanding of what a podcast is. So not everyone's always engaging with them, but again, some people have never listened to them. The huge amount of celebrities joining the bandwagon and sort of jumping on board with doing podcasts, that's opening up to a wider audience who perhaps weren't exposed to listening to them. Their favourite celebrities doing a podcast, suddenly they start listening to that, and it allows them then to discover other podcasts that maybe aren't done by celebrities that are of topics that are of interest to them. So I think that's helping drive consumption as well, and opening up to a wider audience, because ultimately some people will literally obsess over a certain celebrity or a certain TV show or a certain type of sport or whatever it might be. So yes, it's another media, but I think having it as just looking at it as another channel to communicate. So if you're a business, back in the year 2000s, some businesses had websites, some didn't. Fast forward to 10 years to 2010, you wouldn't start a business without having a website. It's the same with social media in 2010. Some companies had social media accounts, some didn't. Now in 2020, you wouldn't really have a business without a social media account. So I think podcasts are probably going through this process, whereas in 5 or 10 years' time, it's going to be something that's just seen as part of the marketing mix for most companies.
That's why I think a lot of companies should get in on it now, because it's already growing. But the way I see it is, there's a bit in the middle of between being a pioneer and being late. And it's kind of being quite intelligent, actually. So you've done the research, you've let other people make the mistakes, you've seen what doesn't work, you've seen what does work, you find the platforms that are still around a few years later doing their thing, good reviews. I've personally been on 2 podcast hosts since I started podcasting 7 or 8 years ago that no longer exist. And I had to move all of my content somewhere else. It was a nightmare. To do that twice. So you want to make sure that when you're working with people, you're linking with the right kind of businesses, you're linking with the right kind of audiences, but you're also putting out the content that's going to be relevant, but you don't miss the boat, because the last thing you should do is wait for your competitor to do it, because if you're
I completely agree. Yeah, totally. And as well, you do it before your competitor, and immediately it puts you ahead, and it's going to make you look good to the consumer base. Yes, not all of your customers are going to be listening, but some will, and some may choose you because they're seeing that you're doing that. And if you could use it to deliver educational content and deliver real value to your clients that your competitors aren't doing, it's just another way of doing it, another way of instilling value to kind of customer base or potential customers.
Africans Unlocked Season 1.
Welcome back, and let's get straight into brainstorming. So James is still with us. We've been discussing podcasting and how it can be beneficial for your business. Guys, let's pick an example. We're a service-based business. We are not particularly something sexy, maybe law or accountancy or something along those fields. We want to
Why
get
do we
us.
keep on saying law and accountancy when we say non-sexy? We're
They're
gonna start
not
getting some people.
sexy. They're not.
How about
Listen, I work in recruitment. Recruitment's not sexy. I don't mind saying that either. So fine, let's do recruitment. Fine, let's do recruitment. Recruitment's a service business. Let's do recruitment. I have a recruitment agency, loads of experience, good consultants, work with a handful of decent clients, need to grow my client list. There's so much competition out there. There's about 1,000 companies in every city that do what I do. How can I use a podcast to get myself out there? Where do I start?
This is a nice, easy one because there are already loads of recruitment companies who have kind of figured out a system for this. So my opinion on this straight off the bat is if you're a recruiter and you want to, you're cold calling companies, you're trying to get through to the MD or the person responsible for hiring, maybe it's a CTO or the CMO for that department. Generally speaking, you'll get through to the gatekeeper who might be a receptionist or whatever. The answer is going to be no, or your emails are going to go unanswered. Straight away, though, if you say, instead of, I'm a recruiter and I want to speak to them, well, I've got this podcast where we're shining the light on local businesses, people who are doing interesting things in their area. Would your MD mind appearing on a podcast? I've got some questions for him, and I think he can really help share what you've done at your business with World. Immediately, therefore, you're kind of breaking down those barriers with the gatekeeper. You get through to that person. You do a genuine interview. Don't just use it as like a hardcore sort of sneaky way to sell to people. But in doing that, you're building. You record the podcast with that person. You can find all about them. You can find out. It's the best market research about that person ever because you really learn the ins and outs of their business as a recruiter. And ultimately after that, you've got the direct email address. You might have their phone number, and you kind of get to know them. You've got that rapport that you can build throughout having that conversation, and that's really valuable. Like straight away, that's a great tool to use. Interestingly, the first way I actually found out about this was because I had a recruitment company who did a podcast interview me on their podcast, and I thought immediately I kind of thought, hang on, why are they doing this? And then immediately I sort of sussed this is actually just a part of the sales process. And I know it's been used by a lot of.
Yeah. That's why he's laughing, because I'm smiling my head up like he's literally describing my business model. But seriously though, because we've been in podcasting for a number of years now, and obviously that's now grown into the TV show, which I'm really excited about. But there's a great example already. I mean, I don't like to blow my own trumpet, but this was a podcast that started off being, done from literally our phones and our headphones. And now we're on a satellite TV network broadcasting globally online. Go to the YouTube channel, check out the other content.
Well, I'm still on the phone though.
Yeah, he's still on the phone. So we can get back in the studio. But this is what I mean. It's look at how that's grown. That's insane, and it's done so much for us. But I cannot stress highly enough how much that works. What you've just said. You speak to a receptionist and you say, "Hi, I want to talk to you about recruitment," and they go, "No, I'll take an email." And I'll tell you what, I worked internally for a long time. So I was recruitment manager, then recruitment director, then the board and all this kind of stuff. And I worked it out once that this one accountancy firm in particular that I worked for, I used to get 9 recruitment calls a day on average.
Yeah.
9. Like half the time I wasn't even advertising roles. I was just getting calls because I was the recruiter. I mean, hi, we're unique. We do everything very differently to everybody else. We are. No, you're not. You're exactly the same as everybody
Same
else.
but different.
Yeah, same but different. And what used to bug me a lot, and this was awful because the calls used to drive me crazy. So I used to get on the phone. Giving you a bit of insight here. I used to get on the phone, and they'd start waffling. And I'd say, okay, look, I said, can you do me a favor? I said, yeah. I said, can you just go and look at my LinkedIn profile for a second? And then they'd go. And I'd say, okay, so there's like 10 years of agency and then another 8 years of client side. What is it you think you can do that I haven't already tried? And if they could give me a solution, they come on the PSL. If I go, that's really clever. I've not heard of that. Let's do that. They'll come on the PSL. If they just start waffling about job boards and their databases and the usual, I say, no, thanks, mate. I'm good. I've got it. Because If you can't add value, then somebody's not going to do business with you. And a lot of those cold calls forget the value. They think that the value is them finding somebody for you, but there's 10 million other people that can do that for me.
Yeah, it's still about
Yeah,
building
it's still about building
relationships.
relationships.
And interestingly,
one of the first examples you gave of
if you're doing a
if you're doing a service-based business, let's say you're a lawyer, or a solicitor.
It's funny
you mention that as well because we actually have two clients who are law firms. Okay. Immediately you think, oh, it's boring because what could be interesting about the legal stuff, right?
There's
two points to make here. Number one, by their very jobs and by their very nature, lawyers or solicitors are bloody brilliant speakers. So they you don't have to train them to be on a podcast because that's what they do for their job. They speak in court, right? So straight away they're engaging to listen to, they're well spoken, eloquent. The other thing to do is just think about what they're actually doing. So one of the podcasts that we produce is specifically they have they're barristers' chambers. They produce podcasts. They work on cases specifically about medical negligence, right? So once cases have passed through. Exactly. So once cases have passed through court, and obviously they can speak about them, they then sort of do a deep dive on the case, why it was successful, or why it failed, or whatever it might be, and kind of just do an analysis on it. So it's building credibility for what they do. It's giving them reputation in the industry because obviously then they get other lawyers or other barristers listening to this stuff to sort of learn from it and engage with it. So kind of double-edged sword there. They're sort of killing two birds with one stone because it's for customers. Yeah.
When you're talking with people who are potentially looking at multiple options and multiple law firms, to be able to say, well, we will have the #1 podcast that they listen to learn what we're doing.
And as well, it just demonstrates knowledge. It's showing. It's not just because obviously by default, clients don't know what happened in court. They don't know about that case. It's a way of saying, look, here's why we're really, really good at what we do, and actually just demonstrating the credibility and ability of their business. So I think that's a really, really interesting case study. But you're right. By default, you think, well, how could you make something interesting for a team of lawyers? It wouldn't be a good podcast at all. But actually, it's great content, and they're good at presenting it. So
I've also seen a lot of success from podcasts with people who are in those kind of areas, for example, that have just kind of almost gone the other way, and they've decided to use the podcast as personal branding and showing the people behind the brand. Because the brand might be, I'll give you an example. There was a company that we're dealing with, flooring. So they are the UK's largest manufacturer of commercial flooring material, right? So these kind of big, thick, set concretes and all that kind of stuff. Like, how do you make concrete sexy, right? And everyone knows this brand. It's a good brand. Builders buy it. Stocked in, all the distribution places. Everyone knows who this brand is. Layman can pick it up from B&Q, that kind of stuff. How do they get people interested? So what they did was they launched a podcast that was all just the really fun people that work in the office, just talking about what they do and funny stories. And do you remember that time I got a call at 4 a.m. because they'd delivered 1 million tubs to the wrong country? And just funny stuff, like listening to them go through the normal behind the scenes. Like if this was a works dinner party and everyone was having a few drinks and sharing funny stories from the office, like that's what this is. And business went through the roof, and they actually started interviewing other people from the industry who are also experts at what they do, with the sole intention of reciprocal marketing. They've got those eyes, I've got these eyes. We could sell to each other's audience, and there's no crossover. Let's do an interview.
Again, you just hit the nail on the head there, quite literally, because it's building stuff. But then I think you're right in that if you get featured on someone else's podcasts, you'll push it to your network as well. So that's why it's a powerful marketing tool. Because especially if you're just doing interview after interview after interview, you're opening yourself up to every guest you have on your podcast, to their network as well. So quite often, as you say, pick people who are going to be complementary to your business.
James, would you say, I'm the guy trying to get my head wrapped around all this. So would you say that a podcast is is an ongoing story that just keeps going, or is it a series of information that gets to an end? Because I'm just thinking, small business trying to get out there, trying to put their podcast together, and the question they have to ask themselves is content. What are we going to talk about next week? Are we going to, I understand that's about being smartful, like you said. The guys, they didn't just sell their product; they connected with people in a different way, and I understand that. But now, for the small business, they might find this very interesting. But the questions we have to ask ourselves is, am I going to have enough content? For how long am I going to have content? How do I maintain my reputability whilst creating that content? So it doesn't become just watered down stuff. That it actually becomes stuff of value. Or does it have an end? Is there a lifespan of a podcast? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'd say is, because it was interesting when I came to do my own podcast, which is called Create, Reach, Inspire, which is more of a personal branding thing, right? I'm very busy. I run 2 different companies, so I don't have the time to literally record a podcast every week all year long. So really, the best way of approaching that, if you're in that situation, is be realistic about what time commitment you can allocate to doing this. Plan it. Record that series in advance. So you might say, want to commit to doing 6 or 8 episodes, and either just tell a story through that series, or have each episode on a different topic. But think about the content that you want to give to your clients or prospects, and just try and break it down, try and plan it a bit. Don't make it up as you're going along. But I don't think there's any harm in just committing to saying doing a series and then maybe doing another series in 6 months' time or the following year, or if you decide you really like it or it's going really well, yeah, sure, of course you can record new episodes every single month. But not all of us have got the time to commit to doing that. So I don't think there's But then again, other people are very much just like, they go full in and they do a new episode every week. But again, it's just down to the individual. But as I mentioned with that McDonald's case studies, that was only 3 episodes. They only did 3 parts in that series, and it had a huge amount of traction and uptake rather. So I think again, you can look at it as a podcast as evergreen content. Also think about kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but think about repurposing it. So when you record episodes, turn them into blog posts, take video content from them, quotes for social media. So it doesn't just have to be that audio. You can use them across channels as well.
Let's use this as an example. Let's tell you what we do. So we're recording this now. We are having a conversation via Cisco WebEx. We're all individually recording our audio because it's been lagging because so many people have been using it. And James and I are both recording on separate cameras as well. So you'll be seeing us looking different places.
Yes, exactly. Well, hopefully, camera is slightly above the laptop, so hopefully my eyes aren't all over the place.
This clip will then obviously go out on the show. So this is going out on Billionaires in Boxes. You can find the full video at Billionaires in Boxes TV on YouTube and on live TV. You will find us with the audio stripped for podcasts. And then this and the podcast clips will then also be broken up into 2 or 3 minute clips that will be repurposed for marketing across social media. And what will happen is every time we share one of those, James will get tagged in it. He will share it with his audience. I'll share it with my audience, and we've both just grown our networks. And it's as simple as that. That is podcasting in a nutshell. But the 2 pieces of advice I would definitely give you is when you've done having a listen to what other people are doing and you've planned, as James has said, let's say the first 5 episodes, okay? Go. Like, start. Don't have it as one of those things that sits in a drawer and you wait for it. Because I promise you, momentum is fantastic. Once you get going and you've recorded a few, you'll enjoy it, right? The second thing I'd say is don't give up too soon. Because too many people I've seen that do a handful of episodes wonder why they're only getting a handful of listens. Well, nobody knows who you are. Nobody's marketed this. You need to push it out. My podcast went from 50 to 60 listeners to a couple of hundred listeners to a couple of thousand listeners to 10,000 plus listeners, and now it's a TV show. But I probably did 10 hours worth of content that 100 people probably heard.
Yeah, and again, consistency is really important. I think, release your podcast episodes, even if you have recorded them in advance, according to a schedule. let your listeners know what that schedule is going to be. So if you release a new episode on Friday at lunchtime, say we release a new episode at Friday every lunchtime, so people can kind of build it into their schedule. And it's the same with YouTube as well. But people will sometimes allocate time to listen to something if they're really engaged with it. They'll say, right, well, I know on Friday that comes out, so I'm going to listen to it on Friday on my drive home from work.
Show, and I didn't think I'd like these things. I actually got onto them because my 6-year-old daughter really likes them. It's videos on YouTube of other people watching videos on YouTube, reacting to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like Gogglebox for YouTube.
Oh my
But there's an American guy, really funny American guy, loud, larger than life. I love his character, Devon Da Vinci. I will give him a tag in this. I'll give him a plug actually. Go and check him out. I'll put his name underneath, and you can go and see him there. He does these really clever reaction videos. But he's reacting to the In-Betweeners, and I love the In-Betweeners. I love all 3 seasons. I love both movies. Justin's looking confused. I'll send you a link to the In-Betweeners. It's amazing. It's a comedy series here from the UK about these teenage boys, 4 of them growing up, and it's just kind of like, I think most people in the UK can relate to the In-Betweeners. If you grew up here, you kind of see a lot of yourself in it. Buying bottles of cider and getting drunk on the park and trying to hit on girls and making a complete mess of it and all that kind of cringeworthy stuff.
That sounds like a very unfortunate experience.
Welcome to life in the UK.
James, just a question. I might be jumping the gun here. I'm not sure, but is there a place where my clients who aren't they're not podcasters, they hear, because they now hear saying for the first time, guys, this is a opportunity, and obviously, is there a place where they can go and learn and grow, and a safe place where they don't have to reinvent the wheel themselves, where there's people that can actually guide them? Is that where that's what you've created?
Yeah, we can. Well, two things here. So, firstly, if you go on podcast.co, we've got 3 content channels which called Create, Reach, and Inspire, which is where the name of my podcast kind of came from. All about how you can create podcasts, how you can inspire others doing your podcast, and also how you can actually grow it and use it as a marketing tool and get more listeners. The second thing as well, if you're just getting started and you want just a quick start, free little mini video course, which I put together last year called the Crash Course. So if you go to podcast.co/crash course, completely free to sign up. I think it's like a 3 or 4 different part video series, basically taking you through the steps to get started and kind of like a little quick start guide.
Love that, James, and I'm glad it worked as a plug as well. Look, we're going to head to a break, but as soon as we come back, we'll finish our discussion with James and point in the right direction of where you can get in touch. Speak soon.
Africans Unlocked Season 1.
welcome back to the final part of Billionaires in Boxers. James, I've really enjoyed this, mate. This has been loads of fun.
Fantastic.
You're
Yeah.
gonna have to come back on, pal. I think we could have realistically done a series of mini episodes about this very subject.
James, I've kind of held back a bit. You can ask Phil. I'm just slightly more boisterous generally, because I didn't want to, so I'm hoping that you would come back again, so the next time
He's not trying to scare you off.
I don't want to scare you off the first time, I'm saying.
So he usually has dad jokes. Today he's been kind of like asking dad questions, like, does this DVD still fit in this?
Someone has to ask the dad questions. That's why the dad is on the show.
Mate. I love it. Well, and well, the reason I really like the question.
Real things, yeah. We got to know.
That's what I'm saying. I'm joking, but I'm being genuine at the same time, because the reason I like the fact that you're asking those questions is a lot of our audience will be sitting and watching this going, this sounds awesome, but I still haven't got a Scooby where to start. So hopefully now that is fixed. You go away and you look around the world at other people that are doing it and listen to their kind of structure. Sort of have a bit of a think about the first sort of 5 or 6 episodes you'd like to create, and then get yourself over to radio.co, watch those training instructions, watch those videos on the crash course there. Podcast.co, sorry, buddy. Wrong plug. What did I say?
Plug. Radio.co, which is fine, but it's just...
It's the other one. He owns that too.
Then?
Yeah, he owns that too.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Sheesh. Okay.
I'm just plugging his other business as well. So, and definitely, once you've done that and you're a little bit further down the line and you're ready to go, make your way over to matchmaker.fm. Like I said earlier, I will tell you which guests come on the show came from Matchmaker, but there's going to be a good few. There's some real key experts on there.
One thing I would say, as well, one thing I would say, if you're not ready to start your own podcast just yet, being a guest on other people's podcasts is a great way to get some experience and get a feel for how it's done. And you can model your podcast on the questions that they're asking you as well. So if you don't have your own podcast, you can still just register as a guest on matchmaker.fm and start sort of sharing your knowledge and sharing your skill set with others and apply to be on other people's shows. So it's a great way of getting experience and getting a foot in the door. Yep. Matchmaker.fm. Yeah.
Anyway, so with a name like that. Yes.
Do you remember that internet thing?
Yes. Is it not working? Damn it. Okay, so try again. Let's try again. So James, with a name like that, okay, have you?
Well, the only. Well, I mean, we've only launched for two months ago, right? And I don't read everyone's messages, obviously, but we do bill it as the Tinder for podcasters, right? Just because it's a nice, easy way to relate to it. And actually, interestingly, when we first designed it, we actually have we haven't built this yet, but we have got like a Tinder-style UI where you can swipe through guests saying yes and no. So the design is there, but as I say, we've yet to build it. But then we were talking about doing it as an app, like as a kind of more like a viral marketing campaign. But yeah, Tinder for podcasters. That's matchmaker.fm. Go and check it out. yeah, exactly.
Here we go. And then
wasn't it like a website from the? Wasn't a hot not one of those websites from like the mid-noughties that everyone used to go on? You could upload your picture and get voted up or down.
I swear, I remember there was a.
Does it still exist?
Probably somewhere. Do you remember they used to have it?
Facebook came from that idea, that concept.
Well, they used to have it on music channels, didn't they? Do you remember? At the bottom of the music channel, you could send in like a picture of yourself on like a really old, terrible phone where it's just really picturesque. And then, like some cheesy text like "I love Jenna forever." And you don't remember who Jenna is next week.
Even we
anyway.
in South Africa. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Crap travels everywhere.
It does.
Anyway, I feel like we've somehow managed to like inadvertently cheapen Matchmaker. Matchmaker's full of interesting guests. Yeah.
We're definitely going to use all of this as slight snippets that we can create ads for, we'll make it work. We'll make it work, guys.
Yeah. We have thought about recording some kind of parody sort of dating. Like in the 80s, they used to have the dating thing where you'd record a video of yourself, Yeah, so we've thought about doing some like advertising campaigns using that as a kind of a bit of a joke, but we haven't actually got around to it yet because obviously we're all in lockdown now. But that was like one of the ideas that we were going to do. So blind date, yeah. Yep. So I'm at James Mulvany on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Come and say hello. You can obviously visit podcast.co and matchmaker.fm. Lots and lots of content on those websites. And I've got loads of YouTube videos as well talking about how to find guests. Interview technique as well. If you're not sure how to interview someone, or if you're being a guest on someone else's podcast for the first time, got a video on that as well, telling you exactly how you can kind of approach it and sort of hopefully to put your mind at ease.
Absolutely fantastic. I'm glad that people can get in touch. Justin, you feel like you've got something to
been
say?
a
It's on the
pleasure.
tip of your tongue, my
I just
friend.
want to say something. James, just to put you on the spot here, if someone were to say hello, would you respond?
Yes.
Yeah, that's one.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because some
Yeah.
people, I'm asking for a friend that they sometimes they're a bit sensitive when people don't say hello back. So I'm just making sure it's one of my friends that if you had to say hello, that you could help them in the right direction.
Yeah,
Of course.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I wonder whether he was talking about me then. I get kind of annoyed when people don't reply to messages.
I know.
Yeah,
I think look at
especially
on social channels, you've got to just try and be proactive and speak to as many people as possible.
I mean,
There's no harm in having conversations,
It's
isn't
in
there?
the palm of our hands, right? It's never been easier. I mean, when have we ever been able to do business development and networking from the toilet?
Or
That's not World 2.0. I don't know what is.
wearing our dog slippers.
Dog slip. Well, look, I'm wearing a Mickey Mouse top. It's Mickey's body. Look. And I've got the head.
I've dressed down full because you dressed down, so I've dressed down a bit.
I'm not putting a shirt on. No. Right, listen, guys. This has been absolutely fantastic. I'll also extend the offer as well. So, given I've done sports podcast, I've been involved in entertainment podcast for business, grown my own, helped other people. If you want some advice, or you just want to pick my brains, or you want to ask me what things I did wrong so you can avoid them, I'm always open. So drop me a message as well and get in touch. We'll put our social media links. Put our social media links below so you can see them also. Until next time, guys, stay global, stay remote.
Xbox.
There we go.
Edwin's gonna kick your.
Penso che un sogno così non ritorni mai più. Mi dipingevo le mani e la faccia di blu. Poi d'improvviso venivo dal vento rapito e incominciavo a volare nel cielo infinito. Volare, oh, cantare, oh, nel blu, dipinto di blu, felice di stare lassù. E volavo felice, più in alto del sole ed ancora più su. Mentre il mondo pian piano spariva, lontano laggiù. Una musica dolce suonava soltanto per me.